Hello, beautiful community. Let's look at Vladimir Putin's over 2 hour long speech. I listened so that you don't have to. There's going to be nothing radically new here, so it's not essential that you watch my breakdown, I must say. But if you want to, please stay with us, and probably we'll do it in about 15 minutes. It was a speech about normalizing things that aren't normal, like permanent war, like militarization of the economy and of society. And it was about guaranteeing Russians a future. It was a "we have a future" speech. It's okay. We might have a couple of punctures, but basically things are reparable, things are running, things are okay today, things are going to be okay 5 and 10 years from now. You're not on a sinking ship, and it's going to be okay. You'll be there in the future, and some kind of normalcy will be there with you too. So that's the gist of it. And of course, yes, the war will be permanent, but there will be ways to lead a normal life through it. That's roughly what he said. So let's break it down according to the notes I made. Well, I just thought to myself how bad Putin is at being Stalin, because he is essentially advocating a further totalitarian turn with additional militarization of society. But it's not quite natural for him. Yes, he's happy to arrest all the journalists, but he's still a guy who favors targeted repression. He's a guy who is psychologically much more of an authoritarian rather than a totalitarian. He'd prefer to not go that far with this totalitarian turn, but he is, of course, pragmatic and cynical enough to know that he has to. I thought it was one of the most Brezhnevite, maybe the most Brezhnevite speech Putin has ever given. It was unrealistic monotony about unpersuasive possibilities of economic breakthrough and economic progress despite the evils of the West. I thought the speech gaslighted that depoliticized blob in the middle in a way that they themselves would recognize. Because here we go. Permanent war is normal. A war without an end is normal. A war without a victory is normal. Saying that everything is normal when it's not is normal. And they're going to be thinking, no, there's something wrong here. We need answers about where we are and about where this is going, and this isn't it. And you saw all of these billboards, with white text against a black background. Tune in, listen up to Putin's speech. And that depoliticized blob in the middle would have felt, where are our answers here about how badly wrong this has gone, and what the answers are, and where we're actually going to be a little while from now. So it was an attempt at future reassurance and normalization that actually is mostly, in my opinion, not going to work. Now, have we said how the depoliticized majority will feel about it? Yeah. So I think the key emotion of the people that Putin was trying to reassure will be more fear and uncertainty. That's the impact on that depoliticized blob in the middle. Now, it could be worse. He could have said things that would have scared them much more, but they will be less rather than more reassured by Putin's reassurances addressed at them. It was a speech overwhelmingly directed at a domestic audience. Now, how will the pro-victory radicals react? Well, if you looked at their Telegram channels during the speech, not well. Girkin was having a meltdown during the speech. They wanted to know about mobilization. They wanted to know about the special military operation being formally called a war. They wanted to know about the world's proximity to World War III. But instead, they got sort of vague conversation about how everything is kind of normal and everything can kind of roll on the way it's been rolling on over recent weeks and months. As I put it, what they got is the West is very mean to us, even though we're nice. Things are hard, but we're coping well. But that's really not what they wanted to hear. How did Putin feel about this speech? Not well at all. He wasn't happy about it. And I think that the sincere part of the speech is really his message that Russia is so terribly unlucky, that the West is so corrupt and evil, and that they just have to share a world with it. They don't have the power to do anything that sort of makes this evil and corrupt West go away. And that's just the reality. And unfortunately, that's the reality that I've had to inherit as your leader. And it's really tough. And I probably, wouldn't want to give this job to anybody. It's not good, but that's where we are. There's a kind of a tone of resignation, similar but more pronounced than the tone of resignation in Patrushev's ideological program for 2023, which we discussed on the main channel recently. How would the people in the audience react? That's members of the regime. Not well. I mean, there were many fake standing ovations, but they wanted answers about where this war is going and how on earth Putin can square his normalization story with his holy war against the West story. And what they're interested in, how do these stories balance out such that we can plan our future career steps, right? That's the problem. Like, what do we expect over the next couple of years? What steps do we take to consolidate our power, to develop ourselves within the parameters of the regime? What do we do? This is not making sense. There's not a clear sense of direction here. Everything is normal and holy war against the West and reformatting of the society onto a military frame. It's not adding up. I want answers because I want to know what I should do. And that means that, little by little, we should continue expecting more activation of different factions within the regime over the years, over the months to come. So there was a subtle and indirect reference to Putin's expectation that the war might still be going on sort of 10, 15 years from now. He said that the mission of those who will in the future be gaining employment in military production will be victory. And that sounds like he's talking about something 12 years away. So there is a message of permanent war, sort of meekly dispersed throughout that speech. And the slow reformatting of the state into a more militarized shape really came out in what felt like an hour-long conversation about how there are going to be bits of support and opportunities of upward mobility for anybody who is involved with the special military operation or the war in the years to come. I'm not going to analyze, because it's not quite my area, what it means that Putin said that they are quote unquote pausing their participation in the New START treaty. But what I will say is that it's worth paying attention to Putin's remark about nuclear tests. He said, if the USA will conduct nuclear tests, we will too. And here is a quote: the Ministry of Defense and Rosatom must ensure our readiness for nuclear tests. There was something that I think is always not given enough by the Putin regime from the point of view of their interests, and that's reaching out to the left in the West. There's a lot of reaching out to the non-democratic right in the West, by which I don't mean that the right is not democratic, but that it has a non-democratic faction that's growing. But there's not enough reaching out to the left. The left's sort of anti-Putin position is rather organic. The Putin regime isn't doing anything to reach for this. But there were a few things of that kind sprinkled, however. There's a kind of a dollop of reaching out to the West, and another mention of the term neoliberal totalitarian values. Denazification was back more than perhaps people expected. There was a lot of talk of how Nazi the West is, not how Nazi Ukraine is. So the denazification talk is back, but it's not about denazifying Ukraine. It's about coexisting, because you can't quite beat it, with a Nazi West. The cultural conservative section was very, very weak and wouldn't have necessarily pleased anybody. He said, look, we don't have a problem if you're gay. Just be private about it. Don't make it a state ideology. The West is making it a state ideology, and that is why it is heading toward spiritual catastrophe. And there was an anti-oligarchic element, whereby Putin again said, look, if you run away to the West, if you stay in the West, you won't get a good deal. If you really love your country, you've got to be here with us. And we're going to have no sympathy for anything that goes wrong with you in the West. So the basic theme is normalization, and Putin taking totalitarian steps while speaking authoritarian lingo. In other words, he's talking about steps that are about the militarization of society over years to come, but he is describing them in what I would call hybrid authoritarian discourse, which basically says, yes, we are doing all of these things that look like your society will take a totalitarian turn, but there'll still be a way for you to somehow have a normal experience at home on the couch. Thank you so much for being with me for this ramble through the speech. I had a technical glitch. I recorded a video for the main channel and I lost the sound. And with my health condition, the problem was that I couldn't immediately re-record it. And that means there's going to be no video tomorrow. But there'll be an announcement tomorrow about when I expect the video to come, which will be very soon. And having sort of delivered my thoughts to the camera, I think it'll be quite a heavy watch, but I do fancy the fact that however the algorithm reacts to it, it's probably the most important video on the channel. So lots of love. Talk probably before then, or maybe after the video on the main channel. Anyway, lots of love. See you soon.